Okay, moving on in chapter 7. If you haven't noticed yet, chapter 7, I told you at the beginning, very, very long chapter, a lot of really dense information. We just finished talking about the type of agency that exists that firms could practice, that agents within the firm could practice. And now we're going to talk about agency disclosure. Very, very important here because as agents, it's our job to explain the agency options that are available. And then we ask the consumer, how would they like to be represented? So let's start off. Agency disclosure in North Carolina. Okay, there's no fact that we're going to talk about in this class more than what I'm getting ready to say. You, as an agent, you will go over the Working with Real Estate Agents brochure. You can see it's in quotations there. That's because that's the name of the form. Agents will go over the Working with Real Estate Agents brochure at first substantial contact with all potential buyers, all potential sellers, and even including like a for sale by owner if you were to approach a for sale by owner. So let me say that again. You will go over the Working with Real Estate Agents brochure at first substantial contact. So let's talk about this. And by the way, please note in the just to make sure that we have it drilled down correctly, please note that this only applies to sales transactions. This form does not apply to leases. It's not required for leases. Okay, so Working Real Estate Agents brochure, boom, it is a specific form. When we go over, Lisa, when did I say that we're going to go over the Working Real Estate Agents brochure?
Generally, the first substantial contact.
Okay, first substantial contact. So from that standpoint, it sounds to me like we need to know what first substantial contact is.
Yep.
Okay, would you like to explain that, or would you like me to?
Well, I think sometimes this is confusing to people because they think they need to like do it immediately, and maybe that sometimes scares people.
Okay.
If somebody walks in the door, you're going to open house, and they're like, "You're going to need you to sign this disclosure," or whatever. They might be a little freaked out. So when you're talking about the property itself, maybe if they come into an open house, you're talking about bedrooms, bathrooms, whatever. But it's when they start to give you any information that can be considered confidential, anything that could impact their decision making, I guess, like money they make or anything like that.
Okay, stop right there for just a moment. Let's go over what she just said and let's review it. The reason I wanted her to say it is because I think to some extent, once you are familiar with the rule, it becomes very, very intuitive. So as an agent, I go over the Working Real Estate Agents brochure at first substantial contact where I describe the agency options that are available. And what Lisa was talking about is how you recognize first substantial contact. So the word that she used is before you learn any confidential information. Okay, but when I'm talking to a buyer, look, we could be talking about the weather, we can be talking about 3 bedrooms, 2 baths all day long. But the minute I'm getting ready to learn something confidential about that buyer, I need to stop them and say, look, buyer, you need to understand your agency options in North Carolina to make sure that what you tell me, I am ready to hear. A lot of times when I talk to agents in the field, they say before I hear any confidential information. When I talk about when first substantial contact occurs, I think in terms of money or motivation, when the conversation turns to money or motivation. Why? Because they're probably getting ready to say something confidential. So technically they mean the same thing. And then in Rule 104, the Real Estate Commission actually describes first substantial contact as being the time that one party or the other starts to act as if an agency relationship exists. Now, clearly, the Real Estate Commission obviously gets paid by the word, and that's why they give you that long explanation. But how does a buyer start acting like I'm his agent? What does he start telling me if he thinks I'm his agent?
You might say how much money they make or how much they're willing to pay for this house.
Yeah, confidential information, right? So everything we just described goes back to what Lisa said to start with. She also gave a great example. Now, on the test, the answer may be first substantial contact, but that sounds too easy for me on the exam. So what I think they're going to do is they're going to set up a scenario, and you have to recognize when first substantial contact is getting ready to occur. If it were me and I were writing a test question, it would be an open house test question. Because on an open house test question about first substantial contact, is it possible that a buyer could walk into the house, look all around the house, say hello, leave without me ever going over the Working Real Estate Agents brochure with them?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, because they didn't bring up
any confidential information.
Yeah, even if they ask me how much the house is for sale for, well, that's public information. Basically, when I think in terms of confidential information, if it's something that I can put in a real estate ad in the newspaper, then, well, I'm not allowed to put it in the newspaper these days, but if I could put it in the newspaper, then it's not confidential, okay? So it's very possible in an open house somebody could walk all the way around and leave and never go over the working real estate agent's brochure. Okay, so now let's assume that we have reached first substantial contact. I want you to look at B for me real quickly, Lisa, and I want you to tell me what those first few words say, the first 6 words there.
The broker must review the brochure.
Okay, so now, is it enough, if you ran into this on a test question, is it enough for a real estate agent to hand you the brochure, buyer, and say, here, just review this when you have time?
No.
No, it's the agent's job not only to give the form, but it's also the agent's job to review the form and review these options. Once the agent goes over there, and by the way, guys, listen, when you're studying this form, and knowing me, I may talk about it for 10 or 20 minutes, but when I meet with a buyer, I have basically a 45-second conversation when I go over the working real estate agent brochure. Now, by the way, here's a tip. When you're getting ready to present the working real estate agent brochure, don't give it to the buyer and say, hey, the real estate commission requires that I do this. State law requires that I do this. This is completely for the protection of the buyer. The buyers will love it if you will do this. So when you hand the working real estate agent's brochure, what I typically tell the buyers is something to the effect of, hey, look, before we go any further, just let me discuss with you the agency options that are available in the state of North Carolina. Obviously, I'd love to be your agent, but you just need to know how agents work. So let me tell you this. If I am your buyer's agent, and I'd love to be your buyer's agent, if I am your buyer's agent, you can tell me anything you want to know. You can ask me any questions that you want to, and I am obligated by law to keep those confidential. As your buyer's agent, I will always work in your best interest. I will try to get you the best deal in the transaction. I will keep your information confidential, and typically speaking, I am paid by the seller in the transaction. But you don't have to choose me as your buyer's agent. If you just want me to show you the home, but you don't want to enter into an agency agreement with me right now, just understand that I work for the seller.
Mm-hmm.
And anything that you tell me, I'll be obligated to take back to the seller. Now, watch this closely. Now that I've explained agency to you, and by the way, if you work with a large firm, you may have to get into dual agency a little bit as well and describe how that works. I'm not going to go over that right now. But now that I've described the working real estate agent's brochure to Lisa and agency options that are available, I could be a buyer agent or I could be a seller's agent. Now I'm going to ask her a question. Will it be okay if I'm your agent and I can work as your buyer's agent? Would that be all right?
I don't know if I'm ready to decide that today.
Well, now keep in mind, I know we just met. Now we need to work together for a little while before you get to know me, but I'm not asking you to sign anything.
Sure.
Okay, at some later point in time, when you've decided that we are a good fit and we're going to work together, I'm going to ask you to sign a buyer agency agreement. But for right now, I'm your agent. Anything you tell me, I'll keep confidential. Let's go take a look at the house. Now, I told her I wasn't going to have her sign anything today. That's not completely true. I am going to have her sign the Working with Real Estate Agents brochure. By the way, what I'm getting ready to say is important, okay? When I'm asking her to sign the Working with Real Estate Agents brochure, what I'm actually asking her to sign is acknowledging that I went over the form with her. In other words, here comes up for a test question. The Working with Real Estate Agent brochure is not a contract. It is not a contract. It's not an agency agreement, all right? What it is a disclosure. I disclosed the agency options. Lisa said that I could be her buyer's agent. Now, interestingly enough, we are in a buyer agency agreement, but it's not the Working with Real Estate Agents brochure that created the agency agreement. Did you notice when I was going over what I would do for her, not with her, what I would do for her as her buyer's agent? I would work in her best interest. I'd keep her confidential information confidential. I would try to give the best deal in the transaction. I'm typically paid by the seller. You remember, I counted those things out. The reason I did that is I just expressed to her the terms of a buyer agency agreement. Do you remember the concept of express agency earlier? The terms have to be spelled out. I spelled out the terms. I said, can I be your agent? And she said, yes. Am I her agent? Yeah, I am in fact her agent. I'm in an oral capacity at this point. It's an oral buyer agency at this point. But notice I said I asked for to sign the agency agreement at some later point in time. And at this point, we're going to go look at homes not listed by my firm, and I would act as her buyer agent in that capacity. What's the problem with oral buyer agency? What could you do next week?
Get another agent.
Go get another agent because it's not exclusive. Okay, let's resend on this just real quickly. Working with real estate agents brochure, first substantial contact. I'm telling you guys, you need to recognize when first substantial contact occurs. In person, in an open house, over the phone. By the way, could first substantial contact occur over the phone?
Yes.
Yeah, it happens all the time. As a real estate agent, you're worried about people being so circumspect about their information. One of the things you'll find out if you ever answer the phone at a real estate firm, people will tell you everything. I'm coming to the area. I need to buy a house. I need to close in 45 days. Otherwise, I'm not going to get the money from my relocation company. I make $128,000 a year. I want to buy a $500,000 house. Probably about half of what they just told me, they would probably consider confidential information most days of the week. So recognize in every situation how first substantial contact occurs. In an open house, and by the way, over the phone, you recognize the type, if first substantial contact occurs over the phone, I can't just stop and go over the form with him. I mean, I can go over it on the phone, but you don't have the form. So there's actually a rule. If first substantial contact occurs over the phone, yeah, go over it. Let's discuss agency. But then I need to mail that form to them within 3 days. Got to be honest with you. Typically, if they call about a house, I'm going to see it within 3 days. So I would just go over the form at that time as well and have them sign. The form is designed so that the last page, you can actually have them sign acknowledging that you went over it. You give them the other pages so they can read it, so they understand agency. But that's the way you go over the work of a real estate agent brochure. Why? Because it's our job to disclose the agency options. It's not the buyer's job to understand. It's our job to explain and ask them how they want to be represented. Let me take you back to a point that I made just a moment ago. In regards to implied agency in North Carolina, I told you if you're doing your job right, it should not happen. I want you to relate that in this conversation now. If you're going over agency at first substantial contact, there should never be a time when the buyer doesn't understand who's representing them. By the way, buyers, sellers, or anybody involved in a sales transaction. Okay. Second bullet point, of course, was don't forget it's your job not just to give it, it's your job to get it and review it. Used to be a test question, it might still be. And then, of course, the part about the signature page. Strangely enough, it's very possible that some buyer, or someone for that matter, may be obstinate and they'll say, oh, I'm not going to sign the form. Well, they're not obligated by law to sign the form. It's just a disclosure. It's just if someone refuses to sign that, first thing I do is ask myself if I went over it correctly, to be honest with you, because since it's not a contract, and it literally says on the form, this is not a contract. So if they're not going to sign it, maybe I didn't do a good job explaining it. But if they do not sign it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that back page and I'm going to write on there, refuse to sign. I'm going to put it in my file and I'm going to keep it for 3 years because I'm required to keep all mandatory documents for a minimum of 3 years from the last day I do business with that person. We've already talked about this lease, so I'm going to skate through it fairly quickly. There's the words you used almost exactly, right? For sellers and prospective buyers, the moment that they get ready to turn into personal confidential information, that's first substantial contact. Feel good about that? Mm-hmm. Okay. And then, of course, we're going to have, if in fact the buyer chooses not to be represented, there's a spot on the form where they can initial that they understand I'm working for the seller. Again, extraordinarily rare in North Carolina, but we do have the capacity to be able to acknowledge that as well. And then finally on this slide right here, look, potential test question alert on this. There's only one spot that on the test where anything other than first substantial contact comes up in regards to agency, and it's this last bullet point down here. Here's the way this works. If, for example, I am a buyer's agent and I'm getting ready to show a property and I am talking to the seller, if I'm talking to the seller or the seller's agent, I have to disclose to them at initial contact that I work for the buyer. Okay, just remember that and you'll be fine. I'll tell you a quick story why it's this way. It used to be that when when agents were showing houses, I would call a listing firm and I'd get permission to see the listing firm. Well, keep in mind, this is back in the 90s. Buyer agency just came into existence. And so at that time, it was important for us to say, oh, by the way, I'm a buyer's agent. So don't tell me anything that you wouldn't want a buyer agent to know. That rule still sticks today. So if I am a buyer's agent and I'm getting ready to talk to a seller or a listing agent, I should disclose to them the initial contact that I work for the buyer. Gotta be honest with you, today we set our appointments up to a third party. Oftentimes, I will not even talk to the listing agent unless they ask me for feedback or if I get ready to write an offer on the property.